Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on what I learned from the last year of painting miniatures. I feel like I really learned a lot last year because I really feel like I pushed myself and tried different things, tried different tools, tried different paints, different brands, different brushes, and I thought I'd make a little list. Because I've been painting for a long time. I've even won a Golden Demon, but this last year I just feel like I just improved more last year than I have in like the past like 5 or 6 years before, just because I feel like I put more of a conscious effort to really push myself and learn and try new things. Whereas before I kind of just did the same thing over and over again. So here's my list of what I learned in 2023. All right, so the first thing I'm going to list is experimenting with different tools and paints from different brands. So I know for most of my painting career, I've been using Citadel paints and just kind of using whatever tools I had. Some I got from the hardware store. Some were Citadel tools, but I didn't think about it too much, and I figured, what I have is good enough. It works well enough. I'll just keep using that. And I've experimented with different paints from Vallejo, the new game color range, from AK 3rd Gen. I've experimented with Too Thin Coats from Pro Acryl, with Green Stuff World, model color from Vallejo. It's really been an eye-opening experience, just learning the pros and cons of each range, and now I kind of have a go-to paint that I feel like is the best for certain situations and some that aren't so good from other situations. And I kind of was really curious, so I experimented with a lot of different paints. But if the whole process seems a little intimidating, maybe just consider trying a few paints from a different range and see if you like it, see if you like the properties of the paint, see if you like how it flows, or if you like the leveling properties, or you like the coverage. And then if you like it, maybe get some more. But I got a lot of paint because I just really like painting, and that's just what I was curious about. And also with different tools, I know like I said before, I was always just content with a basic hobby knife and whatever nippers I had from the hardware store. They were like $10. But I know this year I got God hand nippers, and I got Tamiya nippers, and I got the Vortex mixer, and I'm trying out the Artis Opus brushes, the Raphael A404 brushes, the Kolinsky Sable brushes, and I'm trying out the Wow stick, and those are really good. Those are really good tools. I'm really happy I'm experimenting more and trying different tools in paints, because I look back on just using Citadel paints, and Citadel paints are fine paints, but they're just, like I've said in another video, they're kind of pricey, and their caps, their bottles often have some issues, and I mean, different brands can have different issues, and dropper bottles can sometimes explode on you if you're not careful. So, but overall, I kind of think I prefer the dropper bottles. But if people like the paint pots from GW, I mean, there's an argument for that too. So, but in my experience, GW paints kind of are lacking in some ways, especially with like the whites and blacks and the coverage on many of the colors. Yeah, that's just number one. Experiment with different tools and paints from different brands. Number two, good tools are almost always save you time and make the process more enjoyable. They say, it's not the tool, it's the artist that makes a good piece of work, but a good tool can really save a lot of time. And I totally believe that. And like I said just before on the first point, I recently got some God hand nippers. And, when I first heard of them, I thought $50, that's not worth it. But you can just get it for like $5 or $10 at a hobby store. And Tamiya ones are $20, and those are just fine. I got a comment on a previous video saying I'll stick with my Army Painter nippers, but I mean, don't get me wrong, those all work. But if you're really into like kit bashing or converting, or want to really save a lot of time, I mean, the God hand it's really nice. It really delivers like a laser sharp, crisp cut. And I found doing some kit bashing recently, it enables you to do things that you just can't do with lesser nippers. It's like I found this piece that had like these little screws or bolts on it, and I wanted to put those bolts on a different bit or a different piece. So with the God hand nippers, I can literally just like nip the bolt off of the axe and then put it on a different piece, and it's so crisp of a cut that you it creates like a perfect cut, and then you can just literally put that tiny, tiny little bolt on the new piece. And it gives you crisp, perfect cuts basically every time, and I'm pretty happy I got it. And I also got a vortex mixer, and that's really nice at mixing paint. And I've got, nicer brushes with the Kolinsky Sable, like the Raphael A404, and that really just has such a sharp point. It can hold so much paint that it really makes painting, like details and fine lines, far more enjoyable and faster. And I mean, this hobby takes up enough time. I feel like, anything you can do to save even more time or make the process smoother, more enjoyable is totally going to be worth it. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you don't think it's worth it until you try it, and then you don't want to go back. So, yeah, number 2, good tools, almost always worth the investment if you're committed to the hobby. All right, number 3, good light is very important, especially if mixing paint. So I think I saw in a video someone said you can only paint what you can see, and that's totally true. I remember I started painting in a hobby store once, and there was no real serious overhead light or lamps, so there's just light from the window, kind of like 10 feet away, and yeah, you could barely see what you're doing. I mean, yeah, you could still paint some, and yeah, you kind of could, but without good lighting, it's just going to be a really bad experience. And, I recently got a new lamp, and it really is bright, and I feel like you really notice if it has the kind of a, like a 5600 degrees Kelvin color temperature. It really helps you to see the colors for more truly as they are. Whereas if you have like a lower color temperature, you're not really seeing the true local color. You're kind of seeing like the color with more of a warmer cast on it. So a good lamp with the bright light really helps painting, makes it a lot easier and it's more enjoyable. It's also, it's kind of goes in with the good tools. It's a better tool that just makes the process a lot smoother, a lot easier. And yeah, it's probably one of the most important tools you can get. It's just a good lamp. All right. So number 4, the importance of planning and research. So I know sometimes we all just like to jump into a project and start assembling and painting and just getting it done, and that's totally fine. But if you really want to, I find that if I really want to make something I'm really proud of and possibly even save a lot of time so I don't end up kind of changing my mind halfway through the project and repainting things, it's good to have a plan in mind and do a lot of research to really see what your options are in terms of color schemes or kit bashing or what you want to make, or maybe draw up some sketches. So what I'd recommend is if you are looking for, say, like a new paint scheme, for instance, if you can Google search different artists who have painted that unit you're looking to paint and see how they painted, or see how the Evan Metal team has painted things, or how Golden Demon winners have painted things, or just how people have painted your unit that you want to paint in the past, and just really do some digging and find all the different ways it's been painted. You'll get ideas that you never would have thought of but really work, and then maybe you'll like one part of one paint scheme and then another from another paint scheme, and then you can combine it, and then you kind of can iterate and then just mull it over a little bit and then keep doing some more research and then come up with even better ideas. And I find that through this process, you're going to come up with a paint scheme you're going to be so much happier with than just your first kind of thought without any research. And the research takes a little time, but it just saves you more time in the long run rather than just having to repaint it midway through the project because you realize you found a better way to do it. And I mean, you don't have to repaint it, but I just think some research and some planning goes a long way. And I know personally, I kind of like to plan what kind of colors I'm going to use for different materials. Say I'm painting green skin, I'll look at, examples of skin that are green that I like from different artists, and then I'll pick one I like and then think about how I'd paint it. I'll analyze the color, or I'll look at the hue they're using. Maybe it's more of a warmer green or more of a cooler green or an olive green or like a jade color. And then I'll look at the saturation, and I'll look at how light it is, how dark it is, and then see what paints I have, and then I'll try to maybe make a mixture, maybe just go with the pre-made color. And I find the more I can just plan all the different materials and mixtures, it just makes painting far smoother. I'm not overthinking things in the moment, and just having a plan I feel like gives you confidence and saves time. And also I find when I'm painting, I tend to want to rush through thinking through things too much because I just want to get to painting. Whereas if I'm just committing to planning the paint scheme before, then I'm willing to put in the effort to make that color recipe before the brush hits the model. And of course, there's always going to be a little experimentation before you actually paint it, because sometimes the color you think is going to work doesn't quite work out in reality. But I think it's still good to have a plan, or to really think about what colors you want to use and write it down before you actually paint the model. And of course, this is all optional, but I find that it can save time in the long run. All right, number 5 is have a goal in mind. For instance, are you looking to paint for display purposes or for just tabletop? And then be clear with this in your own mind before you start, and then this can kind of help guide your decisions during the project. So I know many people kind of learn to paint and then they improve their painting skills, and then they paint everything they paint to the best of their ability. But then they have a hard time finishing things because it takes too long to finish everything because they're painting everything to the best of their ability. So, there's nothing wrong with either, something basic, like a basic color scheme with like 3 colors, simple basing, or like going really all out and spending 6 hours on one model. But you want to, know how much time you're committing and have a plan for how much time you want to commit and how fast you want the project to be complete. So it's important to just know ahead of time, okay, I'm just painting this for tabletop. I'm not going to overthink things. I'm not going to cut some corners here and here, but maybe I'll emphasize the focal point a little more to put some more interest and attention there. But on the boots, I'm going to just simplify and give it one coat. So I think that's important to know ahead of time, so you don't spend time on things that aren't going to be that important in the future. So if you spend like 20 hours on one guy and that's just purely for tabletop, then you may think, well, that's time that could have been better spent painting the whole unit if I had to just cut some more corners on the boots or something. All right, number 6 is the most important critic is you. How do you really feel about what you've done? So I think I heard someone say that you should never criticize someone's miniature painting unless they ask for it. And I think that's a good rule, because different people come to this hobby with different goals. Some people just see it as a way to relax and they just want to throw some paint on a model and not overthink it. And, that's absolutely okay, because for most people, this is a hobby and it's what they do to relax or unwind and de-stress. And it's not like someone's commissioning them to paint to a certain level. So if that's how they want to paint, that's absolutely fine. But, as long as you're okay with what you're painting, your own thoughts on your own piece is probably the most important. You may see criticism from someone because you want to improve, but that's your own choice. Honestly, that's why I don't put a ton of stock in entering a lot of painting competitions anymore, because I like painting armies nowadays and I want to just paint a bit more efficiently, and I don't want to spend tons of time on a single guy unless it's like a character. So, and I've already entered Golden Demon in competitions, and I've won a lot of competitions and Golden Demon. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if other people don't like your work, as long as you like it, then that's the most important thing. And it can feel good to get validation, but I don't want to stress myself out to try to spend 50 hours on one guy and then have people say they don't like it. It's not so important what other people think, as long as it's just like a hobby. Of course, if you're like painting for other people and they're paying you, then it is important what they think. But for most people, the most important critic is you, and no one should be criticizing your work unless you ask for it. All right, number 7 is document how you paint something. So I know recently my color schemes for miniatures have been getting kind of complicated. I know like each material, like skin or leather or cloth or wrappings, each has like a base coat and shading and highlights, or sometimes more than one highlight or more than one shading, or maybe I'll do a glaze or transition or blend. And these models are pretty intricate and detailed, so sometimes I'll have like 10 or 12 different materials, from skin, cloth, leather, hooves, horns, wood, weaponry, silver, and then darker silver, and then trimming, teeth, bones, string. Yeah, it gets pretty complicated. So having a written guide that you write as you paint can really help you, document the process. So if you ever take a break from the project and then come back, then you know exactly how you painted it. Because I feel like if I didn't write it down, I would completely forget over the course of like a month just because it's so complicated. There's so many colors I'm using. Yeah, I totally recommend writing down how you paint something. Just really document it especially if you're making mixtures or mixing paint. If you say like, oh, well, I mixed 1 part blue and 2 parts red, get this kind of purple, then yeah, that's even more important if you're mixing colors. So yeah, definitely recommend documenting how you paint with something. This is especially true if you have a really extensive paint library, but if you have just like 20 colors and you paint pretty simply, this is probably less of a issue. All right, number 8, rotate projects to keep things fresh and interesting. So I find that, painting the same thing over and over and over again can get kind of repetitive and tedious. And I like to paint armies, so painting 20 of the same thing can get boring if it takes a long time per batch of like say 5 or 10 guys. So having like a different unit from the same army or a different system can really freshen things up, and then you can learn things from painting different units and then apply it to the first unit you were taking a break from. So I think it's perfectly fine to rotate projects, take breaks, paint things from different armies or different units, and it'll really keep the hobby fresh, and will keep you coming back, I think. All right, number 9, if in doubt about how to paint something, look it up, research or test. So sometimes if I'm painting, say like a freehand tattoo or a pattern on a miniature, or I'm trying to emulate something I see online or from a picture, I won't have the reference in front of me, but I'll just say, well, I know basically how it looks. But yeah, in those instances where I'm not totally sure on how to do something, I find it's almost always better to just pull up the research on your phone or your computer, or print out a picture and then have that reference in front of you so you can see what you're doing. And this could be if you're, say, like kit bashing something, or you're converting something, or you're sculpting with green stuff, or you're painting different patterns, or you're trying to get a certain effect. Don't just assume you kind of memorized it or know it from the top of your head. Just have the reference in front of you. I find that always makes what I'm doing better, even because I notice when I'm painting, I kind of be efficient and just get it done. And so sometimes I'll be tempted not to just pull up the reference, even though that doesn't take up that much effort, just because I don't want to interrupt kind of my flow, I guess. All right, number 10, when trying something new or a new tool, experiment first on a small scale, because you're likely to make mistakes when you're trying something new. So for instance, if you're trying a new paint scheme for an army, paint up a test model first. Or if you're trying a new line of paints, also maybe try just a painting one little piece you don't care about, because I find different tools and different paints, they kind of have their own learning curve. And just because one line of paint really well, different paints may have their own kind of subtleties and nuances that kind of you need to be aware of before painting with them. Like for instance, I noticed Vallejo Game Color, the new one, has a tendency to kind of bubble up, but I find that if you don't have that much paint on your brush and you apply the paint in a very smooth, even, thin coat, and you don't thin it down too much, then it's usually fine. But it's when you apply the paint with like a really large brush and you really thin it down, and then it really pools in the recesses, that's when you start to notice bubbles. So I want to learn those kind of things on a small scale where the stakes are low, not on like a really expensive model I want to look really good. So every tool and technique and paint scheme kind of has its own learning curve, so it's good to learn that on the small scale before you commit to replicating that like 100 times. And I have a few bonus items. So the first one is, you are probably capable of more than you may think now with the right training, tools, and determination, be it with green stuff, painting, converting, kit bashing, or just art in general. I know when people see a model they online, and it's like a Golden Demon winner and it looks perfect, and you're just like, wow, that's so incredible. I can't even imagine doing something like that. Well, personally, I'm of the opinion that most people can do something of that caliber if they really wanted to, and with the right training or guidance. Because I feel like people get very, I see some of these people on Instagram that get like thousands of likes and they're Golden Demon winners, and people say like, oh man, this they're in holy reverence of the piece. But you don't have to. I feel like you could do that too if you have the right training, because usually it kind of comes down to really understanding some basic techniques well, and then just applying it and being patient. I mean, I don't know if it's so much like a talent thing that's totally just kind of inborn, but I think it can be learned, whatever you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to paint to a certain level or use green stuff or whatever it may be. I know recently I've been working with green stuff, and I know I was always before very intimidated with green stuff, and I thought, oh man, how do they do that? How do they make it look so smooth? And it was such a mystery. I thought they must have this like secret skill that's like Illuminati or something, or they went to like a a temple in the Himalayas to study under a monk to learn how to smooth out the green stuff. But in reality, it's just if you have the right tools, you have some silicone shapers, and then you can just smooth out the green stuff. And honestly, it was pretty simple once I learned the right tools and techniques. I mean, I'm getting the results that I used to really think were so amazing before. I'm doing it myself just because now I have the right tools and the right technique. And that's usually what it comes down to, is just getting the right guidance and training. Of course, I had to watch some YouTube tutorials and follow some people on Instagram and learn some things, but when I applied it myself, it worked. But honestly, I find that, without the training or the tutorials, then it's really hard to learn the things you're trying to learn and get better, just because you just don't know what you don't know. I mean, it's possible that through sheer just random experimentation you learn different things, but it can just take a lot longer if you ever get it at all. And also, okay, the next tip is if you can follow someone you want to emulate and ask questions and get feedback, this can speed up the learning process even faster. So excuse the typo. I know recently I've been following Infernal Brush and his Patreon, and I find that following some of his tutorials have been really helpful and been giving me a lot of good ideas. It's really helping me to really refine my craft and get even better, I think, and even more efficient. It's helped me to really clarify a lot of my techniques. So yeah, if you can find someone on Instagram or YouTube you really like, then just follow them, watch their videos maybe a few times, and then really try what they teach. Then I think that can lead to really fast improvement. All right, the final tip is I learned the importance of varnish to unify the finish of a completed miniature. So I find that many people use contrast or shades or washes, and I use washes a lot. And different paints and different metallics and different washes have different finishes, so they all reflect light differently. So I find the point of a wash is to shade and have darker crevices, or have the crevices and recesses of a model look darker than the more raised areas. So you have shading and highlights. But since most paints are more matte and most washes are kind of satin, what ends up happening, I've noticed, is oftentimes the crevices don't really look darker, they look lighter, because technically it is darker, but it's just reflecting light more than the raised areas. So the crevices oftentimes look lighter than the raised areas because it's reflecting more light. But when you look at it from different angles, it's reflecting light differently. So it often looks kind of strange from certain angles, but when you apply like a really matte varnish to the whole area, it unifies the finish, and then you really see the shading, and the raised areas are lighter, the recesses are darker, and you really get that effect of the accentuated edges and details and shading that you're going for. But you needed the matte varnish to really unify the finish. And also varnish helps to protect the model from wear. And so, especially on metal models, they have a pretty strong tendency to chip. So I know I use AK 3rd Gen varnish now mixed with some Vallejo satin varnish, and that seems to be working quite well. I use a ratio of usually 3 parts matte varnish to 1 part satin. You can mix it up, maybe try 2 parts matte, 1 part satin, or 1-1 for more satin. But yeah, just unifying the finish just really helps the model look a lot better, especially if you're using washes. And honestly, I find that washes off, like they apply shading to an area, but it looks kind of weird. I feel like you usually have to kind of layer over it to make it look good. But I find that if you just apply a shade to an area and then hit it with some varnish, it looks a lot better, just because you don't have that mixed shading of the lighter areas being more matte and then the recesses being more satin from the pooling of the wash. So these have been some things I've learned over the last year. I hope they can help you guys out and make your hobby even better, and then make you guys even more confident or more efficient. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments below. I appreciate your feedback, and thank you for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.